All right, at this point, we now have our app. We can see here that we have our DAO app ID. It starts off as 0, but if I go ahead and create my DAO, what should happen is it's going to create the DAO with the proposal we type in, and then this is going to go away because we don't want to create it twice, or we can't create it twice. And what we ideally want to happen is our register and our vote functions pop up here. But before we do that, there's something very important we need to do to our front end, and that is to display our proposal. So to do this, I'm going to get started with writing the UI, how I want it to look, and then we'll talk about how we actually populate the UI based on chain state. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually, let me show you where I'm at. So in my app TSX, in the return value here, I'm coming down right below the DAO app ID and copying over this H1. And I'm just going to simply name this header to votes. And I am going to, or excuse me, we're not doing votes yet, we're doing proposal. And so underneath the proposal, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a text area. And we're going to say class name, it's going to be text area bordered, and give it the margin 2. Oh, there we go. And what I'm going to do is basically show that if I make a proposal, and let's say this is a proposal, this is what I want the user to see before they actually vote, right? So I want them to know what the proposal is before they register and vote. So that's all the changes we're making to the actual UI. The rest of the changes are going to be focused on how do we actually get this value from our app. So what I want to do is I basically want a way to, so if I come up here, right above my, actually, let me come over here. So first what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a proposal, set proposal, and I'm going to say use state. This is going to be a string, and by default, it's just going to be empty. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to my new text area and say value equals proposal. Okay, so now we've set this, we've hard-coded this value to be equal to our value of our proposal state. And so what we're going to do is we're going to now write a function that updates proposal. So we're using proposal, now we got to use set proposal. And to use set proposal, basically what I want to happen is every time, we're out of comment, every time the app ID changes, get the corresponding proposal. Okay, so I'm going to write a function to do this. I'm going to say const get proposal. This is going to be an async function. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const state equals await typed client dot get global state. So this is going to go to our application and get all of the global state values that are defined in our application. And then from here, I'm going to call set proposal. I'm going to set it to state dot proposal. And for now, I'm just going to exclamation point that as string, right? And this exclamation point is basically saying, I know for a fact that this state is defined. And as we'll see in a second, that this isn't actually true, and we'll have to handle this error, but we'll come back to that momentarily. So now what I want to do is every time the app ID changes, so let's get the context. Every time the app ID changes, I want to call get proposal. So the question is, how do we do this in React? And we do it by what's called a effect. So if I write this, useEffect, and this probably isn't imported yet. Oh, it is automatically imported for me. Great. And what I'm going to do is you pass in an anonymous function, and I'm going to say get proposal. All right. And at this point, what should happen is every time this effect is ran, it calls get proposal. But now the question is, how do we actually get this effect to run? We come down here, add a second argument, and for this argument, we're going to pass in app ID. And so now, anytime app ID changes, this useEffect is going to get ran. To show that, I'm just going to do console.log here and show you how that works. So let me open up my console. Make this a little bit bigger, make this a little bit smaller. And so now every time my app ID changes, you'll see here. But you'll notice that we're throwing an error here, right? So we're trying to get the state of app ID 1, app ID 12, app ID 1, 2, 3, and none of these apps actually exist, so it's going to throw an error. So what I want to do is I'm going to wrap this in a try catch block. So I'm going to try this, and if that throws an error, I'm going to catch the error, I'm going to log it, but I'm going to set the proposal to, invalid app ID. So basically, if this fails for whatever reason, so it could fail for two reasons. A, the app just doesn't exist itself, or B, the app exists, but it doesn't have a proposal set, in which case it's not a DAO, and we're going to write out invalid app ID. So now, if I go ahead, I create my DAO. Nope, I forgot to type a proposal. But we'll see our proposal. Actually, let me show that again. So this is my proposal. Go ahead and create my DAO. We can see here for DAO app ID 1160, this is my proposal. If we change this to anything else, it just says invalid app ID. Now we don't want this to happen on app ID 0 because that means it hasn't been created yet. So I'm just going to add a condition here. I'm going to say if app ID is equal to 0, I'm going to set the proposal to the app ID must be set manually or via DAO creation before loading the proposal. Okay. And so now if I go ahead, oh, and I forgot to return. Also need my return. So now when it's 0, it'll tell me this message. When it's a valid app, it'll show the proposal. And when it's an invalid app, it'll say invalid app ID. Okay, so now at this point, we've shown how we can use useEffect to monitor app ID changes and then render the proposal based on the app ID that we have loaded. So in the next video, we're going to talk about how we can actually use this to start to conditionally render our components down here so we can show the register and our vote functionality. Because of course, our DAO doesn't do much if our users have no way of voting. I'll see you then.